Hello, my name is Carlos Urban, and today I'm going to talk to you about the introduction of marketing in the digital era. The reason why I called it this way is because I really believe that in order to be really good in digital marketing, you need to understand the basic concepts of marketing. So today we're going to do part one of this very broad and extensive topic. And I would like to start by talking a little bit about the different eras and the history of marketing and how we got to where we are today. So there there is there is there is supposed to be, or we consider to have, five major eras of marketing history. Okay, so at the beginning, what we call, or what's called, the production era, okay, basically the prevailing attitude, and this was approximately in the 1920s, was a good product would sell itself. So, for example, in the automobile industry, when the Ford Model T came out, it only came in black, and because it was the only car, then you really didn't have much of a choice. So a lot of products were coming out during this era. This is the kind of the industrial era, but there wasn't much of different options. So whatever the product that was available, that was the product that was sold. Then in the, let's say, close to the 1950s, after the boom after World War II, there was an economic boom in the United States, and a lot of products were being made, and a lot of competition was being made. Also, this was the beginning of a lot of radio. Later, we'll talk about television, but a lot of radio, a lot of billboards, and the prevailing attitude was creative advertising and selling will overcome consumer resistance and persuade them to buy. If you look at a lot of the early advertising, like if you go in the internet and you look for the advertising in the 1950s, see, it was very creative. It was almost like it had creative music, jingles. It was almost like a mini film. Some of the ads for like Oldsmobile and those cars that were very popular in that era. Some of the television ads were like 5 minutes long. Or if you went to the movie theaters, a lot of the advertising was like almost like an infomercial these days. Then Professor Theodore Levitt, who is considered probably the father of marketing, came up with the concept of marketing myopia. He wrote an article in the Harvard Business Review, which became the basis on how to look at marketing. And basically, what he, the short version of it is that the product was not so important. What was important was the customer need. So the example that he used in the article was a train. So when almost nobody had cars, and there were no, very few passenger airplanes, everybody basically used a train. So back then, the ideology was, well, we need to focus all the energy on building railroads all over the United States, and you had the what do you call it? The railways inside the cities, the electric trolley. That's what I was thinking. The trolleys all over the city, because everybody was focused. Well, the way to improve the product was to build more of the product that was being used and improve it in speed and improve it. But the fact of the matter is, what people needed was not a train. They needed transportation. And all of a sudden, you had airplanes, you had cars, you had motorcycles, you have all sorts of transportation. And that's when this was the marketing myopia. Focus on the product instead of being focused on the consumer need. You have many different products that could fulfill that need, and this is where the concept started, and then all of the focus later on was on the consumer rules. You need to find a need and fill it. So this was, the basis for the marketing myopia. Later on in the 1970s, I think it was, Professor Philip Kotler, who I believe still alive, from Northwestern, from Kellogg, came up with the 4 Ps. The 4 Ps is still being used today. The 4 Ps is basically, product, place, pricing, promotion. And the 4 Ps became the framework that marketers use to do marketing. And the other concept that was also being formed was the brand management concept, which was started by P&G, by Procter & Gamble. And the brand management concept, basically what it said is that you needed to manage each product or each brand, because a brand could have different products, as if it was your own, as if it was like a company. So almost like having a general manager and basically manage not only all the elements of the marketing mix, but also lead to a certain way the product development, and everything basically went through the brand manager. And I'm very familiar with this concept because in the early 90s I was a brand manager at P&G, and this was basically the way that a lot of companies structure around brand management. And then later on, the brand management concept evolved into global branding and so on. So even today, you have the chief brand manager especially for very big brands, and that person basically leads a lot of the efforts. But what has happened is that another era came, which was started in the 1990s, and it was that the long-term relationship with customers and other partners led to success. So what started happening is that brand managers, all of a sudden you had sales, but the sales structure was basically, instead of being focused by different categories or different geographies, it was restructured based on the big customers. And at the beginning, some companies called it key account management, and then it became customer management. In this era, during like mid 1990s and late 1990s, I was working on this in consulting with retailers, and the concept of category management was kind of invented, or customer management. And basically what this meant was, so let me give you a little bit of background. So Walmart was becoming really big, not only in mass merchandising, but also in the grocery. So the Walmart, when Walmart first started, they didn't have grocery. They basically sold clothing and basically non-food, non-grocery items. But later on, they decided to get into the grocery business, and that's when they started with the supercenters. Eventually, they converted everything into the supercenters. I remember going to a conference. It was called the Efficient Consumer Response, and it was actually co-sponsored by P&G, PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, the consulting company that I work for, and also all the big chains, Kroger and all that, but not Walmart. And it was basically in response to how to defend versus Walmart. What was happening is that Walmart became so big and was growing so fast, not so much because of the way they did marketing or because they had better products. At the beginning, it was thought that it was because they had better prices. But then they realized that the better prices was driven by efficiencies in their supply chain, efficiencies in their technology, and then so all the big chains adopted EDI, this is electronic data interchange, and POS, point of sale data. And that was also, those conferences were also to unify, to have the same UPCs, so that you then have different UPCs for different chains, because that would make things very, very inefficient. So the category management concept, okay, was basically that you needed to set up a team within the retailer to grow the category, because there are different incentives or different motives that the companies and the retailers have. They actually had conflicting interests. So for example, I used to work for Crest. When I was working for Crest in P&G, my main goal was to take share away from Colgate, which was our number one competitor, our main competitor. But Walmart didn't care if the shopper bought Colgate or Crest or any other brand. What they care is that they bought toothpaste at Walmart and not at their competitor, which could be Kroger, or back then also Kmart and all the other retailers. So the category management team basically, so what Walmart and all of these big clients started to ask the big manufacturers was to have like a category captain. And the category captain was usually alternated between the leading brands. So let's say, you had a category captain from P&G to lead toothpaste, and then it alternated with Colgate. And the goal was to increase the toothpaste sales at Walmart or at Kroger. And it became so, this relationship became so close that they really worked almost like a partnership. It got to a point where some people that worked in the Walmart team I'm talking about like from P&G, almost felt like they worked for Walmart. To the point where they had offices in Bentonville, which is where Walmart is, and they were planning and doing everything together to basically come up with strategies to grow the category. Then in the 2000s is what is called the social era. And here, basically, the prevailing attitude is connecting to consumers via the internet, and social media is an effective tool. I would break out the 2000s in more than one era, because in my opinion, you had, at the beginning of 2000s, you had the dot-com era, which then you had the dot-com bubble, where a lot of companies basically went out of business because everybody wanted to be Amazon, and they realized that they didn't have the infrastructure of Amazon. Because keep in mind that Amazon, when it first started, they sold only books and CDs. So it was like, okay, if they sell books and CDs and they're so successful, I'm gonna sell toys, or I'm gonna sell, and everybody thought, okay, I just set up a website and start setting all these products. And then you had the whole issue of the brick and mortar versus the e-commerce, and then all of a sudden the brick and mortar realized that they could also sell through e-commerce, and that's why you had companies like Best Buy, where you can buy online or you can buy at the store. But there were some companies that were very slow at this, like Toys R Us, and eventually went out of business. But what I want to say is that in the early 2000s, as you may recall, I call it internet marketing because it was mostly email, maybe a website, e-commerce, but you had to basically go to your computer. So there was no this constant interaction, because when you were in your computer, most of the time was when you were at work. I mean, the last thing you wanted to do when you got home was to go to your computer, and unless you had something obviously that you wanted to do. So I think that I would divide it into two different eras. For me, a big change was the introduction of the iPhone. When the iPhone was introduced in 2007, it really changed everything. Because prior to that, you had Blackberries or some other. I used to have the Palm Trio. And I mean, to open a website or There were no apps. It was really a frustrating experience. BlackBerry became very successful because you could check email really quickly, and you can, send back and forth email and messages very quickly. But when the iPhone came out in 2007, things changed. And interestingly, it was really not until 2008 or 2009, because at the beginning, the first iPhone didn't have, it only came like with 4 or 5 apps. The Maps apps was a Google map, but I'm not talking about like the Google map of today, which is a GPS. It was basically a map, and it was like a little dot that moved. So, it was very primitive, but for that, at that point, it was incredible. And later on, when 3G came out and the iPhone started becoming faster and faster, it got closer and closer to what the iPhone is today, and you could basically do everything on your phone. As a matter of fact, so think of Facebook, right? So Facebook, when you used to do everything in your computer, and now most people, when they use Facebook or any social media for that matter, they do it mostly through their phone. So I call this era the interactive marketing era, and it's very focused on mobile apps, and also we are now touching the surfaces of artificial intelligence. So let's see, we are at the 16-minute mark. So what I'm gonna do is, this is gonna be like part 1 of this presentation, because I don't want them to run too long. And then the next time, part 2 will be the marketing framework that has always been used, and then we'll go little by little into the whole digital marketing framework. Well, I hope you like this video. If you have any questions or any comments, please, you're more than welcome to leave comments.